Good morning. It is a bright and sunny day, hopefully, where you are. And we are here today to contend in match 5 of round 2 of the International Reparations Debate Competition 2025. So far, 4 schools have secured their spot in the quarterfinals of this competition. And before us are 2 more schools vying for one of the few remaining slots in that round. Those 2 teams, both hailing from Jamaica, Bishop Gibson High School for Girls and the Montego Bay High School for Girls. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an all-girls debate match in front of us today, and I know it is going to be exciting. I am Ravon Thomas Matthews, and I will be serving as your chair judge for this match. Now, we know, and you know, that this competition would not have been possible without some key sponsors and partners. And I want to take the opportunity right now to highlight them, give them a spotlight, because like I said, we wouldn't have been here without some wonderful people such as the University of the West Indies, CARICOM, the CARICOM Reparations Commission, the Center for Reparations Research, the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment, the PJ Patterson Institute for Africa Caribbean Public Advocacy, the University of Hull, and the Repair Campaign. A big thank you to our sponsors and to our partners. Now, let's hear from the ladies. I want to introduce to you, firstly, the proposition team, Bishop Gibson High School, and we'll ask them to introduce themselves.
Hello, good morning. I'm Michaela Muyang, and I'm looking forward to a good match.
Good morning, I'm Tanisha White. I'm also looking forward to a good match.
Good morning, my name is Danielia Jones, and I'm also looking forward to a good match.
Thank you very much, Bishop Gibson High School for Girls. And we now invite the Montego Bay High School for Girls to introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Rena Barker, and I too look forward to a good match.
My name is Michaela Brown, and I'm anticipating an excellent match.
My name is Hanessa Clayton, and I'm also looking forward to a well-rounded match.
Thank you very much. Now, there are some very important people as well that I want to introduce you to. And that is, of course, my judges who will be assisting me in this match. And I want to invite the lovely Roshana Jarrett to introduce herself.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roshana Jarrett, and I'll be one of your wing adjudicators this morning. And I guess I'm looking forward to what will be an exciting match.
Thank you. And of course, not to be outdone, Mr. Nagomo Johnson.
Hello, everyone. Nagomo Johnson. I'll be a wing adjudicator and also looking forward to a good match. Good luck.
Thank you very much. So, one thing is clear, we're all looking forward to a good match. The motion before us reads, this House believes that reparations should be directly paid to descendants of enslaved Africans rather than to governments. One more time, this House believes that reparations should be directly paid to descendants of enslaved Africans rather than to governments. Teams, you know the structure of the competition. But for the benefit of those joining us for the first time, I'm going to give a quick rundown. So we have 3 speakers per team in this debate. The first speaker will get 7 minutes to present their case. The second speaker, 6 minutes. And the third and final reply speaker on each side will get 5 minutes. The first and last minute of each speech is what we consider protected time. During protected time, no points of information will be allowed. Outside of protected time, points of information are not only allowed, they are absolutely encouraged. And in between the sections of speeches, we have something really exciting for you, the viewing audience, that we like to call the cross-examination. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the cross-examination when we get there. Now, you've been hearing me speak for a while, but you want to hear from these stalwarts in debating. And so, I now invite the first speaker from Bishop Gibson High School, the proposition, to open the case, Rihanna Barker. The floor is yours.
Good morning. We are not proposition.
Ah, that is so true. Indeed, Bishop Gibson High School for girls. Yes, and the Prime Minister, Michaela Muyo.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, esteemed judges, worthy opponents, and my fellow teammates. For centuries, enslaved Africans worked for free, but now, when it's time to pay up, suddenly the bank is closed. How convenient. Today, we stand firmly in support of the motion. This House believes that reparations should be directly paid to descendants of enslaved Africans rather than to governments. Before I begin my arguments, let's clarify the key terms in this debate. According to Britannica, reparations are payments, monetary and otherwise, given to a group that has suffered harm. Reparations are not a handout, they are not a gift. They are a debt, one that is long overdue. Descendants of enslaved Africans are individuals whose ancestors were forcibly taken from Africa and enslaved in the Americas, the Caribbean, and beyond. As the first speaker, I will present three key arguments. Firstly, the fact that slavery was a personal crime, so compensation must be personal. Secondly, governments have a history of mismanaging reparations. And lastly, direct reparations are the most effective way to close the racial wealth gap. My second speaker will expand on how direct reparations empower individuals to build economic independence. Let's start with the most fundamental point. Slavery was a personal and generational crime, so the compensation must also be personal. Some argue that governments should manage reparations, but I ask you, why? After all, if someone robs you, the compensation doesn't go to their landlord, it goes to you. But somehow, when it comes to reparations, we're expected to believe that governments who failed to protect Black people for centuries should be trusted with the payout. The people who suffered are the ones who deserve compensation. Their descendants, who still feel the economic and social impact, must be compensated directly. Not governments, not bureaucrats, the people. And before anyone says this has never been done before, let me stop you right there. History is full of examples of reparations being paid directly to the victims. Native American tribes have received land settlements and cash payments to compensate for past injustices. Holocaust survivors received over $3.45 billion in direct reparations from West Germany, stated by United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. They received direct payments because their suffering was personal and individual, just like the descendants of enslaved Africans. Japanese Americans received $1.5 billion in direct reparations for their internment during World War II, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. If the U.S. could directly compensate Japanese Americans for injustice, why shouldn't the same be done for descendants of enslaved Africans? In fact, slave owners in Britain received reparation when slavery was abolished. Britain compensated slave owners with the equivalent of 300 billion euros today under the 1833 Slavery Abolition Act. And who funded that compensation? British taxpayers, including the descendants of enslaved people. If Britain had money to pay off slave owners, they have money to pay off the descendants of the enslaved. Now let's talk about the wealth of nations. The Caribbean wasn't just a passive victim in the global system of slavery. It was a primary engine of European wealth. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, European nations, particularly Britain, exploited African labor to fuel the profits of Caribbean sugar plantations. At its peak, Caribbean sugar made up over 20% of Britain's GDP, as mentioned by Williams, Capitalism and Slavery. These profits didn't stay in the Caribbean. They flowed directly into London's banks, funded the British military, and filled the coffers with European aristocrats. But after all that exploitation, the enslaved received nothing, not 1 ounce of land, not 1 penny of compensation. Meanwhile, British and Caribbean governments today have failed to address the economic disparities caused by slavery. If reparations are given to governments, there's no guarantee that the money will reach those who need it most. But by compensating individuals directly, we empower them to decide how to improve their own futures. In the United States, the median black household has just 15% of the median white household. In Britain, black households have 1/5 the wealth of white households, according to Brookings Institution 2021. This isn't a coincidence. It is the direct result of centuries of stolen labor and wealth. Direct reparations would provide the capital for Black families to invest in education, entrepreneurship, and home ownership, key factors in building generational wealth. When Holocaust survivors and Japanese Americans received reparations, their communities saw significant economic improvements. The same would happen for descendants of enslaved Africans. Reparations are not charity, they are justice, and justice demands direct compensation to the victims and their descendants, not to bureaucracies that have already failed them. Black families are still trying to recover from stolen wages, stolen opportunities, and stolen wealth. Would you say the same if your grandparents' wealth had been stolen and never returned? Mr. Speaker, acknowledging the past but doing nothing to correct it is the same as ignoring it. Governments have failed Black communities for centuries. They failed to protect them, they failed to compensate them, and they failed to close the racial wealth gap. Giving them control of reparations is like giving the thief control of the stolen goods and expecting fairness. Just because the timelines and methods differ does not diminish the legitimacy or urgency of direct payments. The only fair, moral, and effective solution is to put reparations directly in the hands of those who deserve them. No more diversions. It's time to pay up. I thank you.
And thank you very much to the first speaker from Team Proposition. We now invite Rihanna Barker from the Montego Bay High School for Girls to open the case for that side of the house.
Mr. Speaker, honorable judges, and my opponents, a pleasant morning to you all. I want to ask any of the proposition team, what are you mixed with? You think you are all Black or you have a little white massa in your DNA? Wait up, wait. Maybe you have a little Chinese in you. Wait, I need to, let me swab your mouth and give you, and while I do that, give me your mother's father's grandfather name and let me conduct a search to find out if you're worthy of white man reparations. Yes, let me pen you out like 64% Black, 23% Chinese, and the rest of you Scottish. So I wonder if you qualify for white man reparations. It seems like it's a charity with job requirements. Mr. Speaker, does this sound invasive, dehumanizing, and downright disrespectful? Yes, it does. That is why today the opposition strongly disagrees with the mood today. This House believes that reparations should be directly paid to descendants of enslaved Africans rather than to government. Why? Because reparations are more than just tracking us down like they tracked us down in Africa. They are about repairing the fractured economies, restoring the dignity of oppressed societies, and ensuring sustainable growth for generations to come. The idea of distributing reparations directly to individuals is a temporary fix that ignores the broader systemic damage caused by centuries of oppression. Before I dive deeper into my arguments, I want to reinforce that I agree with the proposition's definitions of reparations. It does, in fact, aim to address the enduring injustices of slavery, genocide, and colonialism. These measures must go beyond the one-time payments, however. They must involve structured systemic initiatives to restore broken societies and dismantle systemic oppression. Reparations must be about rebuilding economies, societies, and political systems. So I do disagree, however, with the proposition that slavery was a personal crime. It was an institutional crime inflicted upon all people. There is a difference. Their examples cannot relate to the descendants of enslaved Africans because Holocaust survivors were the ones who received direct reparations, the actual living survivors, not their descendants. That is not what is being argued today. As the first opposition speaker, I propose these two arguments. Reparations must rebuild what slavery destroyed. Individual reparations leave room for mismanagement and does not achieve the goal of reparations. The whole point of reparations is to address systemic injustices. What are these injustices? The dehumanization and dispossession of enslaved people, the establishment of racial hierarchies, the perpetuation of economic and social inequalities that continue to impact our societies today. And two, direct reparations could worsen wealth disparities and social instability, which we already suffer with in the Caribbean. Why hurt us more? We have to separate modern and historical times. All descendants of enslaved Africans are not still poor or are not in need today, but Caribbean nations still struggle with healthcare, education, industrialization, and economic development, all of which can be linked back to the atrocities of slavery. My second speaker will further speak on the logistical impossibility of individual payouts, while our third speaker will summarize and solidify our points. Reparations must rebuild what slavery destroyed. Slavery systematically destroyed nations, economies, and yes, people and their generations to follow. Yes, no doubt about it. Slavery didn't just create poor individuals, however. It crippled economies and negatively shaped the trajectory of Caribbean nations. Enslaved Africans were imperative to build the wealth of colonial rulers, while Caribbean nations were left in poverty, economic instability, and underdevelopment. According to the CDB, even decades after the abolishment of slavery, many Caribbean nations still struggle with basic infrastructure, healthcare, and education. We need economic programs, debt relief, and educational reforms according to the CARICOM 10-point plan. Individual payouts do not fix this. It is economically inefficient due to the prospect of individual mismanagement. Money cannot be unsystematically given to descendants directly without knowledge and awareness of why they're receiving this money, or without proper financial literacy, because it leaves room for exploitation and the worsening of our existing Caribbean social and economic disparities. Moreover, such unsystematic distribution can fail to address structural inequalities that reparations aim to remedy, potentially reinforcing the very disparities that we are seeking to eliminate, the very disparities of race and wealth. We are a melting pot of people. How can we ethically identify which Black man or which Black woman to give money to, and how much money? Implementing reparations through structural programs that include financial education is the way to go for community development and for national development. But how will it be done? How will the government use reparations responsibly? Here are some possibilities. The government could establish a reparation trust fund with representatives from civil society and academic like UWI, and the government with publicly declared financial reports. A reparations accountability act can be passed to ensure funds are legally earmarked, and also the government can give true long-term positive impacts. We do not have these systems yet because we have not even gotten a formal apology from European rulers admitting what they did. But we do have the CARICOM Reparations Committee, the Jamaican National Reparations Commission, and the Barbados Reparations Task Force, among others. Our government can be equitable, just, and practical. Individual payers do not achieve any of the long-term solutions. Now, this leads into my second point. Direct reparations could worsen wealth disparities and social instability. Let me introduce you to David. David strongly believes he's a descendant of Taki, a well-known Jamaican slave who led a small-scale rebellion. Although his long-lost history, David comes from a wealthy Jamaican family with 5 businesses, and at just 23, his net worth is $27 million. Now, according to the proposition's shaky plans, David would receive a massive direct payout of English pound. Congrats. Not accepted. We have made the rich richer. But wait, here's another character, Sal, who lives below the poverty line in the slums of Kingston. Sal is deemed not worthy of reparations because her family history cannot be traced, but she is a direct descendant. She just cannot prove it. There's no evidence. According to the proposition, no reparations for Sal. Now, Mr. Speaker, how is this just ethical? The historical records are not complete. They're incomplete and they're not straightforward enough. Our descendants were listed down with just their first name, their owner's name, or just called by the plantation they belong to. Do not forget that they deemed us as property. We do not have the privilege of well-written and documented family trees. The government can use reparations to fund education, provide housing, support Black businesses, and improve healthcare in creating lasting change. The proposition might allude to corruption, but corruption is not an excuse to deny proper justice. If anything, it proves that reparations should be structured through transparent institutions, not just given as blind handouts. Government can be held responsible by law and public scrutiny. I thank you.
Wow, and thank you very much to the first speaker from Montego Bay High School for Girls. Now we're going to enter into that period of cross-examination that I hinted at earlier. So, how does this arrangement work? Well, firstly, the opposition team is going to pose questions to the proposition team, who will then answer those questions. That will happen 3 times. Each question will last no more than 10 seconds, and each reply or answer to the question can last a total of 30 seconds. The team who is asking the question, only one individual at a time may ask. However, for the team that is answering the question, the entire team can chip in to provide a robust and comprehensive answer, provided that it stands within that 30-second time frame. After opposition has asked the 3 questions of proposition and proposition has answered, we will now flip the arrangement 180 and invite the proposition team to do the same. All right, so that is how the cross-examination is going to work. And we will begin the time for your first period, Bishop Gibson High School, when you pose your first question, rather Montego Bay High School, when you pose your first question to Bishop Gibson High School.
We can begin?
Ready when you are, Montego Bay High.
All right. So, given that many records were lost due to the very slavery and colonialization, what objective or system will you put in place to ensure and determine who qualifies for reparations? And whose resources will you use?
We can use genealogical records, census data, and historical archives to allow us to know who are descendants of enslaved persons. And then we can also use DNA testing.
I did not hear their answer clearly.
So you can use genealogical records, census data, and historical archives, along with DNA testing to prove who are the descendants of enslaved Africans.
So my other question, my other part of the question is who pays for that? Whose resources will be used? Will we Caribbean nations have to pay again?
Well, we do have allocated funds, and if we are demanding reparations, which we should get, the least we can do then is to support this agreement and this arrangement by carrying out these genealogical records, or the people giving the reparations can also support this by giving this as a package alongside with the reparational funds.
I want to highlight ethically and morally that we are the victims. My next question leads to how do you ensure reparations are distributed fairly if 2 descendants of enslaved people have vastly different socioeconomic backgrounds, one rich, one poor?
Well, regardless of their situation, everyone would be, well, at best, distributed properly, because even in today's society where you have grants and funds, everybody gets the same amount. With part, you get the same amount. And even though it would be great to like look at everybody's individual situation and then tailor to them what is best for them, that is not practical because that would be unfair.
All right, and that is the final question, Montego Bay High School for Girls. We now invite Bishop Gibson High School to pose questions to team opposition.
Many Caribbean governments are already in debt. How do you ensure that reparations paid to them will not simply be used to service their existing obligations?
I think that is exactly why we need reparations because of our high debt levels, because it was caused by slavery and colonialization. We were so busy creating Europe's wealth that we lacked our wealth. That is what we need reparations to do. That's what the CARICOM 10-point plan has, to reduce our debt levels. That is one of the obligations of reparations, to reduce national debt of Caribbean nations, because
highlighting the national impact that we endured from colonialism.
Okay. How do you justify the fact that Britain paid reparations to former slave owners but refused to do the same for the descendants of enslaved Africans?
I am not justifying that fact. I want reparations just as much as you. However, I want reparations to be done ethically, just, equitably, and practical. And that is through government initiatives. government can regulate that money when we get the reparations.
Further, we're not trying to mimic what was done in the past. We're trying to do it with an innovative way, a better way, a justified way.
To correct the wrong.
Can you name a historical instance where reparations paid to a government successfully benefited an oppressed group rather than being lost in bureaucracy or corruption?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Can you name a historical instance where reparations paid to a government successfully benefited an oppressed group rather than being lost in bureaucracy or corruption?
Well,
We cannot say that for sure because that is not something that has been done. And this is why we're having the conversation today, because it is something that we are fighting for and we understand the capacity that we have. As a matter of fact, we can talk about Namibia, where Germany is considering paying Namibia as a state for the indiscrepancies, the injustices that would have been done to them. We are having this conversation today to fight for cases like that, where our state can be considered and there can be equity, justice for all.
And that is time. Thank you very much for that first period of cross-examination. At this point in time, we invite the second speaker from Bishop Gibson High School for Girls, Tanisha White, to extend the case for side proposition.
Mr. Speaker, distinguished educators, esteemed opponents, and my fellow teammates, good morning. As Deputy Prime Minister, I stand before you today to reaffirm our stance that reparations must be directly paid to the descendants of enslaved Africans to ensure economic justice, personal empowerment, and targeted restoration. Slavery was both a moral and economic crime, exploiting enslaved Africans for wealth while denying them independence. They were freed with nothing, while their enslavers were compensated. This injustice persists today in generational poverty and a racial wealth gap. The reparations we demand are not charity, but repayment of a debt owed to those whose ancestors built nations with their labor. These reparations must go directly to the descendants of the enslaved, not to the government or institutions as acknowledgement of their suffering and loss. Some may argue that governments are better suited to manage reparations, that they can distribute funds more effectively, that public programs and social services are the best way to uplift Black communities. History tells us otherwise. Governments have had centuries to correct the damage caused by slavery. They have had every opportunity to address economic disparities, provide land, fund education, and create wealth-building programs for the descendants of enslaved Africans. And what have we seen? Time and time again, they have failed. The mismanagement of funds intended for reparative justice is not hypothetical. It is well documented. Jamaica provides a clear case. In 2017, Prime Minister Andrew Holness publicly apologized for the 1963 Coral Gardens massacre, where the state violently attacked the Rastafarian community. As part of this apology, a 10 million Jamaican dollar trust fund was promised to compensate victims and their families. Yet by 2019, 2 years later, that money had yet to be dispersed, found in Jamaican Gleaner in 2019. What good is an apology when no action follows? What good is a promise when it is left unfulfilled? This is not just a Caribbean problem. The global failures of government-led reparation efforts prove that when the funds are entrusted to bureaucratic systems, they often never reach the people they were meant to help. In Uganda, the International Criminal Court awarded 52.4 million euros in reparations to victims of Warlord Dominic Ongwen, stated in the International Criminal Court documentation. Yet nearly a year later, not a single government had contributed to the fund, leaving over 50,000 victims still waiting for justice. And in Malawi, the 2013 Cashgate scandal revealed that government officials and private contractors had embezzled millions of dollars meant for public welfare, documented in the BBC. Proving how easily large-scale funds can be mismanaged, stolen, or wasted. These failures should serve as a warning. When reparations are filtered through government channels, there is no guarantee that the intended recipient will ever see a cent. Proposition also claims that reparations should be distributed collectively, that public investment in infrastructure, education, and social services is a better alternative. But collective approaches too often dilute the impact of reparations and fail to reach the individuals who need them most.
No broad program can undo the personal economic devastation inflicted by slavery. A government initiative does not erase individual financial hardship. Social program does not put food on a family's table. Reparations must go directly to the people so that they have the power to determine their own economic futures. Position raised a concern of who qualifies for direct reparations, whether it is too difficult to determine eligibility. The reality is, we already have clear and established methods for verifying lineage. Genealogical records, census data, and historical archives allow us to trace ancestry with accuracy. DNA testing, while not perfect, can serve as a supplementary tool in cases where documentation is lacking. If records were good enough to track enslaved people when they were bought and sold, then they are certainly good enough to track their descendants for reparations. Direct payments to descendants of enslaved Africans will not only restore stolen wealth, but they will also have a transformative economic impact. Imagine what could be achieved if every eligible Black family had access to financial resources declined. Resources that could fund home ownership, education, and entrepreneurship. Imagine a world where reparations are used to eliminate student debts, allowing more Black students to pursue higher education without financial barriers. Imagine a future where Black businesses flourish because they finally have access to capital that has been denied to them for centuries. This is not just about financial compensation, it is about economic empowerment. Governments have had their chances to address these injustices and they failed. They failed when they prioritized compensating former slave owners over the enslaved. They failed when they left newly emancipated Black people with nothing but poverty and exclusion. They failed when they created policies that continue to exploit Black labor while denying them the means to build wealth. And they fail today when they make promises they do not keep, when they establish committees they do not fund, and when they pledge reparations that never come. The time for government excuses is over. The time for direct reparations is now. To those who still believe that governments should manage these payments, I ask you this. Would you be willing to have your paycheck given to the government to be managed on your behalf with no guarantee of when or if you'd ever see it again? No one would accept that for themselves, and no one should accept it for the descendants of enslaved Africans. Reparations belongs to the people who suffered, not to governments, not to bureaucracies, and not to politicians. And we will accept nothing less. Thank you.
Indeed, and thank you very much to the second speaker from Bishop Gibson High School. We now invite the second speaker from the Montego Bay High School for Girls, Vanessa Clayton.
This one is Michaela Brown, and I take the opportunity to greet you all. Good morning. My worthy opponents, we deserve collective justice, and this is to refute all the what was said. Justice as a people, justice that includes us, our forefathers, and our children to come. I, as second speaker, will explore this perspective, further highlighting the flawed logistics of individual impact as opposed to that of collective, further emphasizing why government is best equipped. The impact of slavery didn't stop with our ancestors. Cattle slavery, and I quote, didn't just end, it left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country, not just individuals, the Caribbean nation. 49% of child poverty, a legacy of Belize's colonial underdevelopment. Haiti, still in debt, not because of our own government, but because of colonial states. High homicide rates today as a result of colonial underdevelopment, as said by the Repair Matters campaign. Exploitation. Outside of statistics, our history explicates all of this. The entire, more specifically, the Cape Caribbean Studies syllabus has described how our social institutions, education, family, judicial systems, and I quote, are broken. Policies were designed to perpetuate suffering upon the emancipated and the survivors of genocide. And by proposition stance, our only claim to reparations is through the experience of our forefathers. We are having this conversation today because we still suffer from the legacies of slavery. And this is what further cements why we deserve reparations today. So how can we reduce our qualification to individual compensation? We suffered as a nation. all groups, from Maroons to Rastafarians, and collectively we should be compensated as such. We deserve collective justice, justice as a people, justice that includes us, our fathers, and our children to come. Further, our situation is like no other. It's not like Germany where there was immediate relief. They could trace their victims. It's not like the US that had to pay, that paid Japanese American intermittent camp survivors. We are rectifying centuries after, and so we cannot use the same approach, the same tege-dege approach to tackle the present and the wide-scale impact of the legacies of slavery. It wasn't just personal, it impacted the nation, which leads me to the next point. Direct payouts today are dege-dege, logistically unsuitable, restrictive of our justice, restrictive of our rights, impractical and inconsistent. How do we decide who gets reparations? Not every Black person is a descendant of the enslaved Africans, yet we collectively as Black people continue to suffer today. Will they be left out of the compensation? Because of slavery, it is often difficult for us to trace ancestry. According to a statistical study conducted by Pew Research Center, most Black adults say their ancestors were enslaved, but some are still not sure. Your neighbor can find her ancestral records. But you cannot. You're not on the list. Your ancestral record is missing, gone with the documents that they burnt, or the ones that were, and I quote, poorly maintained, handwritten, or simply lost as recounted by Pew Research. The same documents that had our people's names, their individual identity erased. How will genealogy track this? The surname Asante was crossed out, buried for the last name Smith, Brown, and the first name John. How will genealogy track this? And giving reparations based on skin color is unfair, inconsistent, and may incur civil unrest. Let's say we don't use race with its inconsistencies. Let's say we innovatively find a way to track our ancestry, as you said, genealogy or whatever the website would have been. Whose resources, or rather, which body will ensure that there is equity in distribution of the funds? Which body will have this access to information? Which body will ensure that even our diaspora has the opportunity to be impacted? Is it individuals? Is it again private entities who are guided by profit? Oh, so we have to, like our ancestors did, pay twice for our justice? Governments can target reparations through national and social programs, ensuring everyone affected benefits without bureaucratic chaos. That proposition made is a shortfall. They can fund education so that future generations don't suffer, so that our children have the power of knowledge. Provide businesses and grants so that businesses of our nations, Black-owned businesses, can proliferate and thrive. At large, correct the economy that was crippled as a result of colonialism. They can reform land ownership, land tenure, so that stolen wealth is properly returned. Giving government reparations allow for development, sustainable development, ensures, not accepted at this moment, sustainable development that ensures that we and our children can experience generational wealth, so that in the same way we can indirectly compensate our ancestors by fulfilling the fight of the system that they were subjected to. Direct payouts will not survive, will not suffice. We deserve the correction of our broken institutions. That is the holistic purpose of reparations. After all, it is what you define reparations to be. Not just money, but qualitative corrections that cannot be made by individuals. Institutional correction. When our system became and remained broken, our justice went above the realm or scale of individual correction. We as a nation have suffered, and we deserve a means that can foster national reconciliation. We want to build up the nation of our the nation that our ancestors had to build on their backs. I thank you.
And thank you very much to the second speaker from the Montego Bay High School for Girls. We're going to enter into the second period of cross-examination. And we do so by inviting the first question from Team Montego Bay High School.
All right, my first question is, it is basic economics that if you inject billions in payouts into an economy, inflation, cost push inflation will arise. How do you prevent inflation from skyrocketing and reducing the actual value of reparations to individuals?
Well, firstly, the economy is not just based on only descendants of enslaved Africans. So when you give reparations to them, they will build their communities. So this doesn't mean that the economy will actually be like inflated because you're just paying back the descendants of enslaved Africans. So take for example England, where Black people don't make up the most of the population. Why would they inflate the economy just because Black people have gotten reparations?
All right. People are not perfect. We all live in the same Jamaica with the bad roads, poor healthcare, and slow economic growth. Who will legally obligate that reparations go to this instead of squandered in crime, civil unrest, and poor financial institutions?
Wait, could you repeat that question?
People are not perfect. We all live in the same Jamaica with the bad roads, poor healthcare, and slow economic growth. Who will legally obligate that reparations go to this instead of squandered in crime, civil unrest, and poor financial decisions?
To answer this, I'd like to raise a point that let's take Jamaica, for example, where we do have these bad roads and all of these issues, and the government is not fixing these issues. So how will we get any kind of confirmation that when they get these reparations that we will be getting it? And as we stated in the speech, there are examples of embezzlement where the governments take these funds for themselves or for other issues. And keep in mind that the government has allocated funds that are supposed to be used for these issues. So why should they take our reparations?
Stop fighting Caribbean governments and fight European governments. How does individual reparations redress high debt levels of our Caribbean nation, the public health crisis, and technological transfer as stipulated in the CARICOM 10-point plan?
Could you repeat?
I said, stop fighting Caribbean nations and fight the European colonizers. How does individual reparations redress high debt levels, public health crisis, and technological transfer as stipulated in the CARICOM 10-point plan as what we want?
Firstly, we are not disagreeing. We are not fighting the Caribbean nations. We're saying that when we get our reparations, when reparations are given to us, we want it to be given directly to the people. It has been shown time and time again that they are not being used or allocated to the right resources and being given and actually benefiting us. We're not here for,
You've never
Right.
gotten reparations. How can you say that?
And thank you
Thank you
very
for
much for
answering.
that first half of the cross-examination. And we now invite Bishop Gibson High School for Girls to pose questions to Montego Bay High.
If the governments have historically failed Black communities through colonialism, apartheid, and systematic racism, why should they be trusted to handle reparations now?
It was not the government that failed during the apartheid. It was the colonial states that subjected us to the legacies of slavery and consequent impacts.
To racial apartheid, to being at the top of our political systems and intruding on us. We are fighting European rulers for the reparations through the government so it can redress what we're asking for, the national debt, the public health crisis, the education programs.
Remember, it is not just personal. We were impacted as a nation, and so correction has to be such. Thank you.
Wealth is built through ownership of assets like property and businesses. Wouldn't direct reparations be more effective way to empower Black communities to build generational wealth?
Wealth is also built through sustainable and economic development. That can only be that is only the capacity of the government.
And government can redistribute land. Government can help with all of these complex issues by law. Our government is not a dictatorship. We have public scrutiny. We can ask for transparency. We can demand transparency. So we're not giving to corrupt government just so.
And there are precedent laws that ensure transparency.
Would it not be morally wrong for governments to control the reparations, as this would allow them to dictate how descendants of enslaved people are compensated instead of allowing those harmed to decide for themselves?
No, it would not. With governments, we can use the CARICOM 10-point plan, which stipulates how governments will work with it, or how governments can reduce their debt, how governments can fix our health system, how governments can fund education programs. You talked about scholarships for Black students and how they're going to use it. You cannot tell me that's what they're going to use it for.
Individuals cannot contribute or mend educational debt.
Our systems were broken. Our systems, our societies, that's what we need to address.
And thank you very much for that electrifying period of cross-examination. Thank you to both all-girls schools. At this point in time, we will pause the debate for 1 minute, and that is to allow the finishing touches to be placed on those applied speeches. Speeches I'm sure that are going to be quite awesome and electrified. That 1 minute break starts now.
All right, your 1 minute has elapsed.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the final speaker from the opposition team, Montego Bay High School for Girls. That speaker being Vanessa Clayton, to close the debate for side opposition.
Their arguments are not addressing anything from the CARICOM 10-point plan, and that is an injustice. Good day, Mr. Speaker, honorable judges, members of this House. After listening to team proposition, I can't help but feel a deep sense of disappointment. You see, I expected a real argument, a compelling, well-reasoned case for why direct payouts would somehow bring justice for the atrocities of slavery. Instead, what we got was a flimsy, short-sighted, narrow-minded, feel-good fantasy that does absolutely nothing to address the long-term systemic oppression that still plagues Black communities today. So let's set the record straight. Reparations are not just about compensation, they are about correction. And if we are truly committed to justice, then we must reject the band-aid solution that team proposition is offering and demand a real lasting transformation. First and foremost, DNA and historical records are not perfect. You said so yourself. So what about the ones that are forgotten? What justice do they get? Team propositions observe suggestion to rely on genealogy records and DNA testing to determine who qualifies for reparations is an insult to the very concept of justice. To claim that we can simply shift through historical records which are incomplete, lost, and manipulated is reckless at best. And don't even get me started on DNA testing. Are we seriously going to reduce centuries of brutal slavery and systemic oppression to genetic fingerprint? What about the countless descendants who have been denied access to records or whose lineage doesn't neatly fit into the scientifically flawed formula? Their first argument, slavery was a personal crime, so the remedy must be personal. This is a weak and misguided argument. Slavery was not a personal crime. It was systemic, state-sanctioned atrocity that governments profited from, legislated, and enforced. For team proposition to suggest that the remedy must be personal is to completely ignore the role of the government in perpetuating this institution. Slavery was enforced through laws created by the government, and this legacy still wreaks havoc on the descendants of those who were enslaved.
Their second argument, governments have a history of mismanagement. Here we go again. The classic deflection. Team Proposition wants to use the government mismanagement as an excuse to abandon the responsibility of the very institution that caused the harm in the first place. Yes, governments have made mistakes, but this is not an argument against reparations. It's an argument for accountability and better management. If we were to use their logic, we would dismantle every public service simply because the government has failed at times. Should we abandon the idea of public education or healthcare just because they were mismanaged at some point? Of course not. The answer is not to run away from government involvement, but to hold it accountable. Their third argument, individual reparations are the most effective way to close the racial gap and encourage entrepreneurship. This is perhaps the most naive and oversimplified argument. Closing the racial wealth gap doesn't come from simply throwing a lump sum at problems that require long-term solutions. The racial wealth gap exists because of systemic barriers, not because Black people don't have money. And while Team Proposition wants us to believe that individual payouts are the solution, they fail to understand that one-time payouts won't fix centuries of oppression. One-time payouts are a cheap way out, a quick fix to a problem that demands institutional reform. Mr. Speaker, it is almost amusing how quickly Team Proposition jumps to the Holocaust as their golden example of reparations done right. But let's be clear, this is not the same situation. They forget that Holocaust survivors were still alive when reparations were issued. Their names were well documented. Their suffering was very much recent. Germany had a functioning system to trace victims and distribute compensation effectively. Contrast that with slavery, shall we? Where the very government responsible for oppression deliberately destroyed records. Can Team Proposition tell us how they plan to distribute reparations when we don't even have full documentation of who was enslaved, where they were taken, or who their descendants are? Or are they suggesting that we just hand out checks based on skin color? But let's assume for a moment that Team Proposition somehow overcomes the logistical disaster they've prepared. Even if they manage to distribute these reparations fairly, what then? What happens after these one-time payments are spent? Do they believe that a lump sum will magically erase the generational effects of poverty, land dispossession, and systemic racism? Mr. Speaker, this is not just naive. It is very much insulting. A check will not fix the educational disparities Black communities face. A check will not repair the broken justice system that disproportionately criminalizes Black people. A check will not rebuild Black-owned businesses that have been historically shut out of economic opportunities. And this brings me to the fundamental question: what is the true purpose of reparations? Team Proposition clearly sees it as a financial settlement, a way to compensate individuals for past wrongs, but they've completely missed the point. Reparations are not just about acknowledging the past. They are about correcting the present. They are about ensuring that communities most affected by slavery are given the resources, opportunities, and policies to build sustainable generational wealth. And only a government-led approach can achieve that. Take Germany, for example, the main example of the proposition. After the Holocaust, they didn't just issue a one-time payment to survivors. They funded educational programs, built community institutions, and implemented policies to ensure Jewish communities. Under an agreement, they actually paid $7 billion in reparations, which was adjusted to inflation, to the Israeli government to help resettle Jewish refugees. And this is what true reparations look like. The verdict is clear. Team Opposition wins. Team Proposition has failed to provide a practical, ethical, or effective model for reparations. They've ignored the systemic nature of slavery's legacy, reducing it to an issue of individual compensation, and they have refused to acknowledge the long-term consequences of their flawed model, consequences that would leave our communities no better off than before. Meanwhile, Team Opposition has demonstrated that reparations must be structural, sustainable, and national in scope. We have made it clear that the only way to correct historical injustice is to dismantle the very systems that uphold it. And so, Mr. Speaker, the choice is not just clear, it is undeniable. If we want justice, we must reject the empty promises of Team Proposition. If we want real reparations, we must demand systemic reform. If we truly care about correcting the injustices of the past, we must stand with Team Opposition, because this is not just about reparations. This is about the future of our people. I thank you.
And thank you very much for concluding the debate for side opposition. Now, to wrap the debate overall, we invite the reply speaker from Bishop Gibson High School for Girls, Daniela Jones.
we are mixed, that is how the opposition chooses to undermine reparations. But let's take a step back because they also claim this is not an argument about reparations. If that's the case, then why did the second speaker spend majority of their time arguing about it? My honorable adjudicators, even they cannot keep their argument straight. Let's be clear. This debate is not about whether reparations should not be given. It's about who should receive them. And instead of addressing that, they try to blur the lines of ancestry to deny direct descendants of enslaved Africans what is rightfully theirs. But let's entertain their logic for just a moment. If they claim we're all too mixed to receive reparations, then are they also saying that slavery's effects have dispersed? Because just minutes later, their own speaker admitted that we are still suffering from slavery's legacy. Which is it? You cannot have it both ways. Either we are still suffering, which means reparations must be paid, or we are not. In which case, what are they even debating? And let's talk about documentation. They question how we can allocate reparations fairly, yet historical records exist. Church archives in Spanish Town, official slave registrations, records that were used to track our ancestors as property can now be used to identify their rightful heirs. If records were good enough to enslave us, they are good enough to compensate us. They argue that Black people cannot manage money. Are they saying that we are incapable of handling our own finances? Because let me remind them, descendants of slave owners were never asked about their financial literacy before being compensated. The British government paid 20 million euros in 1834 to former slave owners, over $21 billion in values today. And no one asked if they would invest it wisely. But suddenly, when it's our turn, we must prove our responsibility. That is not a concern for the economy. It is blatant discrimination. And let's expose the biggest flaw in their argument. They say wealth can only be built through the government. But if that were true, why are so many African and Caribbean nations still struggling despite years of governmental control? In Jamaica alone, 21% of the population still lives below the poverty line despite governmental efforts. Haiti, one of the first nations to break free from slavery, was forced to pay 150 million gold francs to France in 1825, reparations in reverse, where the government where was the government management then? The reality is, when money is placed in the hands of the government, it rarely reaches the people who need it the most. Then they say direct reparations would worsen the economy. Let's talk facts. When Germany paid over $89 billion in reparations to Jewish Holocaust survivors, did their economy collapse? No. So why, when it comes to us, it is the direct payment is suddenly a threat? Slave owners were paid and their economy flourished. But when it's our turn, our governments are to settle. When it's our turn, we are to settle for government programs. That is not reparation. That is delayed injustice. They say we should trust the government to decide how the money is used. But tell me, would any of them accept their paycheck being handed to the government to be managed on their behalf? No, they would demand what is rightfully theirs. Yet they expect us to sit quietly while our reparations, our paycheck for generations of unpaid labor, are handed over to a system that has never prioritized us. And finally, their entire argument rests on one plan, CARICOM 10-point plan. But where's the proof that this is the only way that reparations can work? We have seen time and time again that trickle-down policies do not directly empower Black communities. They say Black students may not use it for education. So what? It's their money. If former slave masters were not policed on how they spent their reparations, why should we? And let me ask one final question. If they truly believe in reparations, then why do they fight so hard to make sure that the descendants of enslaved Africans never see a cent of it? This is why we stand for the motion.
And thank you to the Bishop Gibson High School for Girls and thank both teams for a wonderful, fun debate. The judges have in front of us now the arduous task of deciding who the winner of this match is going to be. We will excuse ourselves and have ourselves a very likely fun debate ourselves. All right, so we'll be back with you hopefully soon.
I'm Tanisha White, captain of the Bishop Gibson High School debate team, proudly representing the lavender and purple.
I'm Danielia, here to show the world that Bishop Gibson is known for excellence, passion, and brilliance.
And I'm Shamoya Swebi, ready to argue for justice and prove why Bishop Gibson High School needs to win.
Reparations matter to us because it's about honoring the difficulties our ancestors had to go through whilst ensuring fairness for future generations.
Bishop Gibson High School for reparations,
justice,
and change.
My name is Rena Barker.
My name is Hanessa Clayton, the team captain.
My name is Michaela Brown.
And I am a part of the debate team at the Montego Bay High School for Girls.
Located in Montego Bay, St. James, Jamaica.
Reparations matter to us because history isn't just about something we study.
The impact of colonialism and slavery still exists in modern day society.
This well-established and deserved opportunity is one that is capable of rebuilding my nation.
Jamaica, like so many other nations, still feels the scars of colonialism and slavery.
I'm not the only one who can acknowledge the significance of this means of restitution. Reparations matter to everyone who has that opportunity for impact.
They represent justice for the past and hope for the future.
Reparations represents accountability and justice, and this is why reparations matter.
Reparations are not just about righting the wrongs of the past. They're about securing justice for the future. Let us be the voices that challenge, inspire, and create meaningful change. Choose Montego Bay High. MP, HSSO, MP, HSSO, MP, HSSO, MP, HSSO.
The Center for Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this international reparation debate competition. This international reparation debate competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparations so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional / international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
Where is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end. It left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us, join the calls for justice, and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood, because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. Enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement, deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and the children. According to Lucille Mathurin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else.
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lower their enslavers' expectations and reduce suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Chui from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often miss the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what will be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan escape with the plaiting of one's hair? Oh, the drums, listen, dance, communicate. For tonight we fight a battle not even death could spare. Blue eyes, white skin, master said that's beauty within. But guess what? Black, brown, gold, royalty, reparations, we are owed. Them say hassa, but we say cassava. That's where we get the strength from to beat and conquer. For tonight we're returning to Ghana. You may say, I'm a descendant of slaves because of the rich melanin that gushes from my pores. But I came to tell you tonight, I am not a slave, rather the descendant of kings and queens. I am the embodiment of the divine. I do not chase, I align, I attract. What's meant for me already has my name on it. I am the personification of beauty, the expression of love, the creator of life, the acknowledgement of freedom. So go ahead, call me what you want, because when I die, bury me in the oceans where my ancestors jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
And here's what does need reparative justice. It is the seasoning period when we landed on the soil and they took away our names and our gods and our culture, and no slave system that we understand thus far has ever had that deculturalization process embedded in the process of our enslavement. So our enslavement was not just physical, it was not just culture, it was spiritual, because you took me away from everything. Who then must I look up to? Who then must I emulate? Who then must I kill myself in order to elevate you?
What is common about the wealth? A flag raises high, but the strings still pull from London. We sing our anthems in borrowed tongues, march to the beat of siphons, drums, celebrating a freedom that still pays tribute. Independent? What is that when the governor's shadow still lingers? They tell us, we free. Tell that to the bones at Rappery. The 196 who fought and won only to drown in chains. Our Negmawan. Do the people of North Devon not hear the howls raging for their home? The tide spits their cries, their names foam in fury, salted by a sea that will not forget. They call us independent, yet a crown still sits above 14 nations, still bent at the knee, still ruled by a throne built from our gold. They took our labor, snatched our names, they welcomed our craft, then cast us adrift. Windrush mothers, fathers, exiled from the empire they built. What is common about the wealth? Our persistent potency that perseveres through acute artistry. We carve language into legacy, turn sorrow into song, drum resistance as rhythm, sink steel into symphony. We are the architects of new worlds, the poets, the painters, the prophets, who make home in remnants still, who forge futures from fractured pasts. They took the wealth, but we are the riches.
And remember that chattel slavery of the African people was also genocide. This is not highlighted sufficiently. If you take my home island of Barbados in the Caribbean, the British brought 600,000 people into Barbados. 600,000 Africans were brought into Barbados. The black population of Barbados today is 280,000. How do you reduce 600,000 to 290,000 after 200 years? They brought 3 million into Jamaica. At the end of the slavery malarkey, there were just about 600,000. The survival rate of African people in the Caribbean was about 17%. It was horrendous.
The Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community.
But I will say to you, therefore, that the issue of reparations for the transatlantic slavery is an issue that we will take up with you, and that the appropriate apology and compensation is paid, and that the international community accepts that this should never happen again.
And yes, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, slavery is a crime against humanity.
The concept of reparations would take the question of development repair, and it would be multi-generational. What needs to happen is face-to-face discussions, which we deem as absolutely important, because if you can't see me or hear me, it is not appropriate to be able to make a judgment as to who or what I am and what I should receive.
Progress also means reparatory justice to heal historical wounds and climate justice to secure our future. We must be bold, demand what is old, and build a Caribbean that thrives.
Reparation Research is thrilled to launch this international reparation debate competition. This international reparation debate competition that we launched today for secondary schools is one of our most important projects. How do we engage youth on matters of reparatory justice? The change needed in the education system can only be advanced when the youth are engaged and their voices are heard.
Why is reparations so important in and for the Caribbean? Because time comes for justice for our ancestors. Time comes for the Caribbean to insist on the right to development, to be compensated for the violence against our ancestors. So outreach to the young people who have joined this movement is critical.
And this initiative is phenomenal. And you know why? Because it's engaging with young people. And it's young people that I believe, okay, are going to be the future of the reparatory justice movement. The greatest weapon that there is in this whole fight for reparatory justice is the young people of today. I hope this debate spurs a whole new generation of advocates for reparatory justice, and the UK and the EU have got to make amends for the ills of the transatlantic slavery. This is going to be a phenomenal competition.
There is no mass movement that isn't a youth movement. And we certainly want reparations to be a mass movement. So it's really exciting, though, to have a regional stroke international debating competition. And I'm looking forward to your participation as you construct your arguments for and against, remembering that the 10-point plan for reparatory justice is our guiding framework for the areas in which we are demanding compensation, because we certainly want to impact the public opinion and awareness in Europe. So it's fantastic to have the United Kingdom participating as well.
So why is it important for youth to be involved in the reparation movement? Being involved in the reparations movement is critical to youth if one is to know their history so that they can understand why their societies are functioning as they are today. The future of the countries we live in are dependent on the current situation that exists today in our countries. And these current conditions were created by the past, including indigenous genocide, African enslavement, indentureship, and colonization. Being involved in reparations is about seeking justice, seeking a way to reduce inequalities in our own countries and then in the broader world. It's about seeking a more peaceful and balanced world, where global problems are solved in partnerships, not in isolation. I believe the sponsors are hoping this competition will allow our youth to gain knowledge about the past so that as young people, you'll be able to make better decisions in the future and make our countries better places.
We know that we need to understand stories about people that look like us. So the fact that so many of you young people have registered was so encouraged by your enthusiasm and your passion for wanting to enter this debate. It is so important. It's just at the core of who we are, that we need to understand where we come from, understand our true history, and having a debate competition on this particular topic is such an important milestone. To have a real conversation about repair, and the fact that our young people were so articulate with their presentations, and to ensure that we keep educating our young people, because you are the future of us and are the Caribbean's a sustainable future. So congratulations, everybody.
We are looking forward to the debate. Encourage everyone to join the debate. Thank you so much, all.
Where is the justice for the 5 million enslaved Africans trafficked to the Caribbean? Think about it. Chattel slavery didn't just end, it left deep, painful scars across each Caribbean country. The deliberate underdevelopment, the brutal trauma and violence we inherited. It's time to repair this damage so we can build thriving, sustainable economies where young people like us can dream big, achieve more, and live better lives right here in our own home. Do you see why repair matters? Stand with us, join the calls for justice, and sign the petition for reparations at repaircampaign.org/petition.
It's very important that this is understood, because we can't talk about legacies before talking about what left those legacies on our landscape. Enslaved Africans were subjected to the worst atrocities imaginable: kidnapping, storage in filthy barracoons, the Middle Passage, forced drowning as in the case of the slaver Zong, branding with hot iron, including by the church, with SPG being seared into the flesh of those they owned, unrelenting field and factory labor, legal codes that rendered them non-human, and harsh punishments when they resisted enslavement, deportation, dismemberment, hanging, imprisonment, severe flogging, including of women and the children. According to Lucille Mathurin Mayer, and I quote, "Neither age nor pregnancy exempted women from corporal punishment. Rather, they were laid down in the filthiest place the driver could find for floggings. Child labor was rampant, and women and girls faced sexual violence." Orlando Patterson wrote in his Sociology of Slavery the following: "The sexual exploitation of female slaves by white men was the most disgraceful aspect of Jamaican slave society." Unfortunately, the church was complicit in this crime against humanity. Initially, Christian planters did not think that the African was of theological significance. According to Elsa Gavaya, and I quote, "Early English slave law almost totally neglected the enslaved as a subject for religious instruction, as a member of a family, or as a member of society possessing some rights, as the same rights as everyone else."
Did you grow up on Anansi stories? Yep, most of us have. But did you know that Anansi played a major role in our ancestors' survival? So let's talk about it. He's more than just a trickster spider. He was a means of inspiration for resistance.
Anansi's cleverness in outsmarting his rivals mirrored tactics enslaved people used in their daily lives. By pretending to be foolish or inept, a technique known as play fool for catch wise, enslaved people lower their enslavers' expectations and reduce suspicion. These methods, inspired by Anansi, are known as Anansi tactics, or in Twi from Ghana, Anansi Sem. Anansi outwitted powerful animals and even white enslavers using cunning and wit. During the plantation era, Anansi tales were shared in enslaved quarters and sometimes in front of European enslavers. These stories, recorded in journals, reveal how enslaved people used public performances to mask hidden defiance. Plantation whites often missed the rebellious messages in these tales. Caribbean Anansi stories depict him evading punishment, tricking enslavers, and a whole plethora of adventures which highlight the resistance and survival through Anansi tactics.
400 years ago, my people were dragged from their homes, tribes, families, placed on floating wood, and shipped across the Atlantic to what will be later described as the most inhumane act of all time. Cold, dark, uncomfortable, cannot describe the trip in ships where whips did not fail to miss. Injustice, rape and disgrace, blood rains, brute, force, ignorance, hate in their veins. Sweat and tears, labor revealed, produce from king fields only for the esteemed. 400 years of eroding one's pride, culture, heritage, value. 400 years of the iron chain, stringing up, leaving bare. Oh, but they never cared. Why fight when you would be met with sharp blades? So don't you dare cry out in fear. Why not plan an escape with
Ladies
the
and
planting of
gentlemen, the
one's
judges
ear?
are back, and after a period
Oh,
of
the drums,
intense
listen,
deliberation,
dance,
we
communicate.
have come to the conclusion. We know who will be moving on to the quarterfinals of this competition. I want to say, what a wonderful treat of a debate. You guys have set the tone for the day. You have energized me. I'm happy I got out of bed this morning. I feel good. So first and foremost, good job to both teams. So what is it that we are debating? It's a question of whether or not reparations should be paid directly to the descendants or to government. And we got a host and a litany of really rich ideas. We got the idea of the practicality of the motion in the first place. Is it easy to find the descendants or not? Proposition tells us that it's easy enough to find the descendants. There are modern technologies that existed, such as DNA tracing and mapping, combined with the historical archives that existed for the tracking of us as property that was done by the enslavers. They say between the two of these things, it is going to be reasonable in order to find the descendants. Maybe not easy, but it can be done. Now, team opposition disagrees. They say that, listen, the records that existed back then, they aren't good. They're bad records. For one, they're spotty. They were handwritten. It's going to be tedious. And in fact, oftentimes the colonizers destroyed these records. And so it is going to be increasingly difficult to actually find out who these descendants are. And that's problematic. That's problematic because then it won't be an equitable system. Maybe Tariq over here, who is a descendant from Turkey, he's a really rich guy. David, he's a really rich guy. He descended from Turkey. He gets the money. But then Sally over here, she's really poor. She is also a descendant, but she doesn't have proof. She won't get the money. And there's going to be some sort of inequity. How did the judges rectify this? One, there is something called proposition fiat. That means if the motion implies that there's an option or another, it means that the other option is possible. So the motion says we're going to either directly pay it or pay it to government. By virtue of the motion saying we'll directly pay it, it means that it can be done. It's proposition fiat. The motion is not going to ask you to defend something that cannot be done. So that's the first thing. It can be done. We do think, however, it is a legitimate argument from the side of opposition to say, even if it can be done, it's going to be inefficient, it's going to be difficult. So we kind of wrapped that up to say, it really does depend. Fine, it's going to be difficult and imperfect. It can be done. The question is, are the outcomes worth this kind of burden and difficulty? That was the question on the judge's mind. And, you know, that's where the debate really shaped up. So firstly, we heard that one, the governments are bad actors and that we should not be giving money to government because governments are corrupt, they're inefficient, government bureaucracy is terrible, and we got a brilliant analysis on the inefficient bureaucracy that ties up government from the second speaker from the proposition, Tanisha White. It was left at the end of that speech. There is no doubt in the minds of the judges that there is a significant barrier to the proper distribution of the wealth should it be funneled through the government, especially with that analysis of what happened in Uganda, what happened in the Kora Garden massacre. We thought that was brilliant. However, opposition then tells us that there are systems and checks in place to hold government accountable. They tell us that one, they are government, and so they're up to public scrutiny, and that there are bodies in place and that can be made in place to ensure that government does what government is supposed to do. And in fact, they went a little bit further. They said that government corruption isn't an argument against paying money to government. It's an argument against, and it's an argument for ensuring that government becomes more transparent. We thought that was particularly interesting. Also, this idea of personal versus institutional racism, enslavement, and where it really lies, we thought that was really interesting as well. But where the debate really flipped on its head for us falls right here. In government's world, we pay the money directly to the man, to the individual, as hard or as easily as that can be, right? We pay the money directly to that person. The question then is, how does that person use the money? That government says they use the money however they see fit because it is morally just and the right thing to do. And so they take a moral argument, a moral stance on that. And you know, that's good, right? It's morally just for them to do what it is that they want to do. But what we wanted to understand is that morality is good, but we also have morality on the other side, because it's also morally right to pay to the government since slavery was an institutional thing, right? So on the question of morality, is morally right to pay it either way. So the question then comes down to which one is the more pragmatic way. We pay the money to the guy, to the individual, and that guy uses the money to do all sorts of things that do not benefit the guy, that does not help. He doesn't use it on education, and you guys conceded, Bishop Gibson, that he doesn't have to use it on education, he doesn't have to use it on healthcare. It's his money, he can use it however it is that he sees fit. And while that may be morally and principally true, what is the pragmatic outcome of that versus the pragmatic outcome of Montego Bay High School for Girls saying, listen, we're going to give it instead to the government. The government is going to use it for infrastructural development, healthcare, economic benefits, and all these wonderful stuff, right? Even if government is corrupt and it's not going to be a perfect distribution of wealth, it is going to be through the mechanism that they thought about public transparency, scrutiny, perhaps voting them out. It is going to be done, perhaps not as efficiently as it should have been. And so what do we get? We get a man on the side here with the money in his hand, as you guys conceded, may or may not use it for wonderful things. And we wanted to understand how it is that that money is going to be distributed to that particular individual is going to lead to great outcomes, or at least good outcomes. That's the bare minimum, at least good outcomes. Perhaps that money, you can collect more taxes from that money. Perhaps the people decide to become entrepreneurs. Perhaps someone decides, say, listen, I might not spend it on education because I'm a pretty silly guy, but my kid is a really bright kid and I can send him to college and he can use it from there. Perhaps I use it and buy a Lamborghini, but that Lamborghini has to be taxed and then all of a sudden government revenue increases. There are many ways in which the direct transfer of the money to the individual can transcend just a moral benefit, but to a pragmatic benefit. But in the absence of that, because Montego Bay High School had the moral benefit and had some kind of pragmatic benefit, the judges concluded that the winner of this match and the team that will be moving on to the quarterfinals of this competition is the team in opposition, Montego Bay High School for Girls. I know I said a lot and I said it very quickly. I want to slow down so that I can give the credit that this debate deserves. The scores ending this match: Montego Bay on 285 points, an astounding figure, to Bishop Gibson High School for Girls, 279 points, an astounding figure. Ladies and gentlemen, it is very, very rare that a team scoring 279 points doesn't top the leaderboard in terms of all the matches played, much less to not have been the winning team. It really was a wonderful, wonderful match. And I think both teams should be very, very proud of themselves. Once again, the winning team, Montego Bay High School for Girls versus Bishop Gibson's 279. The best debater from this match comes to us from the winning team, and that is Honessa Clayton, the reply speaker. Congratulations, Honessa. We thought that was a brilliantly crafted reply speech. We also want to give commendations to both teams for a really electrifying cross-examination section. Now, again, congratulations, Montego Bay High School for Girls. I can't say this enough. Very well played, Bishop Gibson High School. Ladies and gentlemen, Montego Bay High School moves on to the next round of competition. The next match starts promptly at 1 p.m., where we will see two teams vying for another slot in this competition. Yes, quarterfinals match, another slot in the quarterfinals of this competition. And those two teams are, in proposition, Magati High School from Jamaica, and in opposition, Queen's College from Guyana. This house opposes the idea that moral responsibility diminishes over time. It has been a treat. I'll see you at 1 p.m. Congratulations again, both teams.